YouTube, welcome back to WTFRC Cars once again. Right, so let's crack on with fitting these lovely Witte von Diff housings. So I'm going to start with centre one, and the first thing we need to do to get down to this centre one, I'm going to have to remove my battery telemetry, but that's only Velcro. And then you want to undo these two here, because we then need to get to that. So I'm going to get these two screws out and get that mudguard off, and then I'm going to remove this bolt through here, and that will allow this to come free. We don't need to remove it completely, we just need to be able to lift it up to slide this whole chunk off in one go to release the diff. So these two, that off, and then this one bolt through there. I'll get that on, and or get that off, should I say, and then we'll get back to what else we need. So all you need to do with these two screws is just back them out. You don't need to take them all the way out of the mudguard. That lifts off. Then the screw that goes through here, I take it all the way out. That releases this bit, and then just pop the screw back in, just into a couple of threads, and then it don't go missing. So we want to lift the connection wires out of the way, and then this is completely free. And basically, if I can get a good shot from it, we just need that to be free so we can get down to those 4 screws, because they're the 4 that we're going to be removing next. So 2 on this side, 2 on that side. So we'll get all them 4 out, and it does help. I'm using an MIP tool set and the MIP speed bits. But if this is not quite long enough to get down, I might end up having to manually do it with a screwdriver. But yeah, that's them 4, so we'll get them 4 released, and then you should be able to lift this whole mechanism up, the top cover for the diff, and slide it off. That's also why we needed this end off. You just need to slide it up a way to let you get to the diff itself. But let's get them 4 out, and we'll see how we go from there. Right, so hopefully you can see from top there, that's the 4 screws, and I've just backed them out. So if we lift the wires out the way, and then you should just be able to give it a wiggle, and up it comes, and then you've got that whole assembly off in one go. And if you notice the motor plate side, it'll be worth putting a little drop of thread lock on there, because that is aluminium, whereas the other side's plastic. So yeah, the 2 screws that go towards the rear of the vehicle, they could do a tiny bit of thread lock on them. But that's got us down to the actual diff itself, and we should, if I line, see if I can move that axle around a little bit. So if you get them lined up, you should then just be able to lift this diff out. And this is a lot easier if you can use 2 hands on it. There we go. So that's us diff out. So we're going to have to disassemble this, because we need to reassemble everything back into the new diff housing, wherever that's disappeared to. There it is. So what we're looking at doing is swapping this part. So one, the aluminium part should be stronger anyway, and also with it being aluminium, it should radiate a bit of heat away from the diff gears if you get spinning them up. So first thing what I would suggest do is give it a good wipe around with a cloth, get all the gunge and crap off it, and then we're going to undo these 4 screws in the top at diff. So I'll crack on with that and then show you how we get on. So this is the 4 screws out. We don't need to alter anything in this unless you are going to adjust the shimming, but this seems fine as it is. So I'm just going to pop that gear off and give it a good clean up. Be very careful when you're removing the gasket, because you don't want to rip that. You can buy spare ones, but most places I've looked are out of stock at the moment for whatever reason. So that's going to be that out. Let's put that somewhere safe for a minute. Right, the next thing we want to do is, I find it easier with either some sharp tweezers or snipe nose pliers. We're going to reach in there and lift this gear set straight out. Once you've got that out, then you need to get the rest of the diff oil out of it, and then you've got a grub screw, if I can find it. It's got to be on here somewhere, there. And you want to take that out because we're going to line the pin up with that and get the pin out through it. So let's get these gears out, and I'll find something to put them on so I don't get it all over my pit mat. And let's get all that gunge cleaned out. See you in a minute. Right, so when you're trying to get this pin out, if you take the grub screw out of the side, then line the pin up like that, and then I find it easier with some either tweezers or snap nose pliers to just utch that pin across. And then once you get it out here, you can pull it out and you can get the shims and the actual bearing and everything off the old diff cup. So let's get them done, and then I'll show you how we reassemble it. Right, so these are all the parts out of the original diff that we're going to need. Don't forget your seal from the bottom and the original shims. Now, these shims are the bit that I'm going to have a look at to see what we need to actually shim this diff casing. Because the original housing on this one just needed one of the larger ones and one of the smaller ones. But, I'm not sure what these are going to need. And I have got a bunch of other shims. So right, first things first, let's get all these screws out and the grub screw. Once they're out, I'm going to put the pin back through, the rubber seal on it. It's also a good time to inspect your gears. Make sure there's no flat spots, broken bits, none of the backs are broken, and none of these LSD plates are bent or anything. And check your smaller gears, check for wear on the little shafts that go through them, check that your pin's not damaged or broken. But yeah, I'm going to get the grub screw out of this, get these 4 screws out. I'm going to put that through and the washer, and then I'm going to start having a look what kind of shims we need so we don't get any play in the output. So let's get that assembled quickly, and I'll show you how far we get. Right, so after a bit of testing, what I've found is, and these are the standard armour size shims, so the best fit I could find was 1 of the larger thinner shims and 2 of the smaller thicker ones. So now we're getting ready to assemble it properly. So you want the washer, the bearing on first, which is a really nice fit on this Vitavon casing. Must admit, thank you very much Vitavon for lining this all up with the actual pin, unlike the armour cases that just seems a nightmare to get that pin back through. The Vitavon case, absolute brilliant, just slides straight in. So you want the bearing on, you want your output drive, then from this side you want the small washer seal first, then the larger of your shims. Then on this one I've used 2 smaller ones. This is going to be very dependent on your actual wear or anything on your output, the machining on it, where the hole's been drilled, how accurate armour's been with that. So on here, 1 large, 2 small. You've got your little sealing washer underneath the large one, bearing on it, and let's see if we can get this in here. See if we can get it fastened in vise. So let's see how we're going to assemble this. So where's this little hole gone? So first off, I'm going to need both hands for this. I'm going to get the pin back through. So I'll do that, and then we'll get back and show you how the plates go back in. So we've got the grub screw back in. Put thread lock on that because there's no way of stopping it. There's nothing to tighten it up to. I would have preferred it if they'd not threaded that all the way through, just to give you something to snug that grub screw up to rather than just relying on the thread lock. But thread lock it is. And we've got the pin through. There's no up and down movement, no play whatsoever, but it is nice and easy to spin. So let's see. So I'm going to build this diff back up in the same setup that it was originally. So These, you want the sharper flat side to the facing out of the diff and the nice smoother side in. So let's see how well these drop in. So we want one of them, and then the next one, again, sharper side to the outside, smoother side inside. And if you drop that down, you can then, let's see if we can get it to sit all the way in. And I like to try and line that all up. And then the third one, again, sharper side facing out, smoother side facing in. So we've got that in. Next, you want to take one of your gears, and we're going to line those cutouts with the pin. So let's see how easy that goes in. I usually find this easier to do in vise because you can just spin it usually, and there it goes. And then you want to spin it round and make sure that all the plates have lined. Just spinning the case, it's just easier to get your finger around it really, and make sure it's all the way down and you can feel it, so you can feel that that's perfectly flat. You don't want there to be a step from the outer gear down to that pin, because that means it's not sat in one of the LSD plates. So once we've got that in, next thing we need, let's see if I can do this. Let's see which way they're gonna go. That's one. That's two. Let's see if they'll slide back. And again, if you've taken these off, the sharp side goes to the outside. So I find it easier to line that up and get the flat spot to the top. And then hopefully we can get this one to go in. Trying to keep as much of this on camera for you as I can. Then we need to orientate that flat spot to meet with the other one. And then you should be able to spin the diff case and make sure it's sat down completely. Right. Now we're going to need to fill it up with diff oil. So on this one, I'll be running 100,000 in the centre. I think this is open. Yeah, it is. So this stuff's pretty thick. By no means the thickest diff oil you can get, and patience with this bit is definitely going to pay off, because this stuff takes a while to settle. So if you just try and ram it all in, it's not going to settle down. And try and get it just down the back, but without getting it all over the top. And basically what we're wanting to do with this, you're wanting to fill it up so it's just over the top of the cross sections in the middle. But as I say, it is quite thick this, and it will take some time. And then you can slowly just work it round. The gears will try and lift when you do this, so you will have to sit them back down, especially if you try and go too quick. But basically what we're looking for is for this diff oil, once these gears are, once it's worked round and this bit's pushed down, you just want a slight coating just over the top of those where them gear supports cross. So I'll work this round, get it all topped off, and then show you how we close the diff. Right, so that's been stood a good 10-15 minutes or so. Spun it round quite a few times, pushed the gears down. It's going to be hard to see on here, but the silicone is just covering the middle cross section there. And the reason you don't want to fill it up much above that is because when we put the other gear in, it's all going to try and squirt out everywhere. So basically what we're trying to do now, we need to reassemble this backwards. So if we drop that one in and then spin the diff, try and line it up straight through, and then at least you know where it is. So working backwards, again, sharpest side facing outwards, and at least this will give you a good idea of what went on when we were dropping them on the inside. So then you want this one, and you can see where it lines up. And then we want this one, again facing backwards. And now hopefully you can see, if you've got all the spacings right, it sits absolute perfectly flush with the diff casing. And that's what you're aiming for. Then you know that all the gears and everything are sat down properly. What you can do now is you can just put a little tiny bit more silicone in here and just top those up. You do want to leave a little bit of air in there, so if anything expands as it eats up, you're not building up pressure and it's not trying to break the seal. So I'm just going to put a tiny little bit more in just to top it off, and then I'll show you how to close it. So that's topped off, and I've just let a tiny little bit dribble around the back of those gears. Now if you look at your gasket, if you're not using a new one, you can see the lines where it was lined up previously. So those go to the inside, and basically you just line it back up. So you can see where it was fitted originally, and then if you look where we got the gears lined, so if we try and line that pin up, so what we should be able to do now is have that lined up straight between the holes, and we should be able to position this. And then all we need to do now is line the gasket up. So it's going to be a lot easier with two hands than one, so I'll get the gasket lined up again and then we'll close it down completely. That's what you want to be looking for. Gasket lined up with all four holes. And it's a bit difficult to see, but that's the outer gear sat all the way down on the diff housing. Now, to give you some idea, these are the original diff housing screws. These are the ones supplied with the Vitavon, so they are a lot shorter. I'm going to get a bit of thread lock on each one of these and get them screwed down, and then we can put the diff back in the vehicle. Right, so all screwed back down. What I would do is fasten the screws down in like a cross pattern, so that one, that one, that one, that one, and then nip them up in the same pattern. You don't need to go crazy tight on these because the thread lock's going to hold it anyway. You just need it enough to hold them down and seal the seal against the gasket, and then you should be able to check for smooth operation. There should be no sort of stiff spots or grinding, and should work really nice and smooth. So now we need to get it reassembled into the vehicle, which I'm definitely going to need two hands, because as you put this back in, I find it easier if you line the output shafts up pointing upwards, but as we drop this in, I'm going to have to line both front and rear drive shaft up with this. so it's usually a bit difficult with one hand. But basically you want that drive shaft and that drive shaft in, and then slowly just drop it down into position. So I'll get that done. Right, so the easiest way I found of dropping this back in, make sure the front dog bone's engaged first. Tilt the diff slightly down towards the front, get this one into the diff, because the back one's a lot easier to line up. Once you get them both in, drop it down all the way, make sure these little grooves are completely clean, because you don't want any crap holding the diff up. We're going to get a little tiny bit of thread lock in both these, and then screw the top back down. Before you put this on, don't forget to drop that back in place. You can get it back on if you forget and if you screw that down first, but it means taking all these screws out so you can get one side off to drop it back through. So yeah, we're going to get a slight bit of thread lock just under there on the metal, on the aluminium on the rear, and you can see where I drilled the hole out for the little clip. Make sure I don't pin that power cable anywhere. So yeah, I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of thread lock underneath both them back ones. There's no point putting it on screw, because as you screw it through plastic or nylon, it'll wipe it all off. So little drop in each one of the back holes. The front one currently on this is plastic, so that's fine. Good time to have a quick check of your gear pinion mesh. So a slight little bit of play in there, that's enough. So we'll get them tightened on, and then move on to fastening the end of that in the mudguard back, and that is one centre Vitavon diff housing fitted. Right, so that's all back together. Back one's thread locked, front lock's just tightened down. The mudguard back on, and the two screws, one either side, they're screwed down, and my voltage telemetry fastened back on. And that's the Vitavon diff housing. Or diff cup, or whatever you want to call it, but that's the centre one fitted. Fully functional. Not going to use it straight away, because I'm going to wait for the thread lock to dry in that grub screw, because there's no other way of keeping it where it needs to be. But yeah, seems to fit nice, all rotates well. Tried the front to rear diff action, that's working fine. So, if you've enjoyed the vid, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when we do the front and the rear one, and see if there's any differences or any different shims needed for the Vitavon bulkheads. And I'll catch you guys again next time.